Monsters University is a prequel to Monsters Incorporated. At the time, it was a huge technical achievement to make 5 or so furry characters. And now, in Monsters University, 250 characters have fur. There are so many furry monsters in this movie. Thankfully, we had the technological foundation developed by people who did Monsters Incorporated, and we adapted it so that we could populate this world with hundreds upon hundreds of furry characters.
Today, you see a lot of animated films with characters that have hair and fur, and it's pretty common. But when we created the first Monsters, Inc., we had never animated fur before, and it was scary.
Sullivan had about 1 million hairs on his body, and we had to figure out how to get all of those hairs to move.
To animate millions of hairs, we had to program kind of automatic ways to do it in the computer. So we use something called simulation.
Simulation is motion calculated by software that is too difficult to hand animate.
The main idea behind hair simulation is that we're modeling the hair as a bunch of distinct particles. We're going to figure out all the forces that act on those particles, and once we know the forces, we know exactly how the particles are going to move in reaction to them.
To move the hair particles, we use simple calculations that you might learn in high school physics.
Gravity and mass. So the hairs have a certain amount of weight, and they will bend under gravity, and then they will rest on an object that they come in contact with. So one of our very first tests was this very simple character. It kind of just looks like a mop.
This first test, while it might look pretty simple, has a lot of things going on. Watch when it spins. When it stops, there's a little bit of follow-through. The hair keeps going. The physics are taking over, and they're making the hair move even though the object it's attached to isn't moving anymore.
So the next challenge was to actually apply the hair to a character that could move. And we had a very, very early version of Sullivan. In fact, this version of Sullivan even had tentacles instead of legs. And we did a test using a new dynamics engine that could animate the hair using basic physics. And one of the problems is that the hair kind of swishes around a little bit like a skirt. So it doesn't really have mass. It kind of feels like it's just flat on the body. So it doesn't really feel like fur. It feels more like really kind of thin hair. When the hair didn't look right, we had to really analyze what made fur on animals feel and move and look like fur. We went back to early examples and reference that we had of llama fur. We found that clumping was the key to making fur look like fur, and that means just the hairs that are near each other kind of stick together in these kind of organic shapes and patterns. And it turns out there's a mathematical pattern that we can also simulate on the computer, and it's based on something called a Voronoi diagram.
Voronoi diagram.
The Voronoi diagram is basically a random set of points on a surface, and then we can construct shapes around each one of those points. And because those points are laid down randomly, we actually get kind of an organic pattern of shapes that fit together perfectly. And you see a lot of patterns like this in nature. And we found that we could use those same shapes to make the clumping look natural in the fur of our monsters.
Once we had the hair looking all right, it was time for some real animation. And one of the first shots we got was the shot PR-257, or the shot from hell. It had him bounding across the stage and running into a variety of obstacles. And it was difficult beyond belief. I can't count how many times we must have run this simulation. Anything that could go wrong with this shot went wrong with it. He was doing arm motions which were extraordinary. He would crouch and roar and go like this, and the hair would literally stretch way across the screen. For a while, we couldn't figure out why this was happening. And then we actually clocked it. He was literally pulling 100 to 150 Gs on his arm. So one of the fun things that we put on Sullivan is this thing called the inertial field generator.
Inertial field generator.
It's basically like little digital force fields embedded all over his skin. So when he does a huge motion like that, these force fields kick in and they grab the fur and they tell the fur, yeah, I know you're going like 100 Gs, but maybe we'll only let the hair feel about 10 or 15 of the Gs in there.
The tool set they developed for Monsters Incorporated is really the foundation of the tool set we have now. We've just adapted it for every film.
It was used for the moss on the sub in Finding Nemo.
It was used to simulate the grass on cars.
It's been used for the animals like Doug and Kevin the bird.
And we also used it for Monsters University to simulate a huge cast of furry characters.
Making these tools has been just enormous fun. They're challenging, but one of the most thrilling things is when you finally see that character come to life on the screen.
One of the things that's really exciting is when we make new technology for a film, we don't know how it's going to be used in the future. And so I can't wait to see what else it does.